Oh, you're live already.
Yes.
Hi, Glenn. Hi again. You're live already. Are
Yes.
we which platform are we on then?
Yeah, I think we are. Hold on. Okay, we are on LinkedIn now.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. I'm glad we worked it out, and we're here with the link. Oh yeah, I got it. I got the notification, as have all your followers. So wonderful. Hello, everyone. Let us know where you're from.
That's right.
We'll give people a few seconds to join, and then get going.
Okay, welcome, Isabel, and welcome everyone. Let's just give everyone a few seconds because we were just figuring out some technical difficulties.
Yes, the joys of live streaming from our living rooms.
Exactly. I'm going to also check the chat here. LinkedIn user from Singapore. Great. Hello, LinkedIn user from Singapore. Let's see.
Yeah, we can't always see your names, unfortunately.
Right. Okay.
In the background.
We've got a hello from Mumbai.
Hello, Mumbai.
Great. So yeah, if you want to ask questions, just leave a question in the chat. I'm Glenn Leibowitz, and I'm happy to have Isabel Rugol.
Rugol.
Did I pronounce Rugol?
I know, it's hard.
I know. I listened to your recording on LinkedIn a little bit ago just to get it, and it's funny, you have it in English and then you have the French pronunciation, and I still can't tell the difference.
Well, I don't expect most people to manage the French R or the French G or the French O. It's just a festival of hard sounds. So.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, no. So we have known each other, I believe, for 7.5 years and counting. When we first met, this is of course virtual. I think, were you in Australia at the time? No, were you in France? You're first in Paris.
Might have still been in France. Yes.
That's right. You were in Paris, and then you moved all the way down under to Australia. And I was in Taipei the whole time. I'm still in Taipei. And you onboarded me. You helped get me on writing on LinkedIn. I don't know how you did it, how you wrote me in, or what you did to persuade me remotely.
I lied, probably.
Exactly. And I just got into this habit of writing on LinkedIn, and then it just took off from there. And I remember it was just you, Dan, Dan Roth, Chip Cutter, John Abell, and a couple others. And through your, I don't know what you did, you ended up building out a team of what you call human editors, right? And
well, there's a story behind that. We didn't come up with human editors. There was a story in Wired covering us, and the headline was something like "LinkedIn brings back human editors," which made us laugh because what other kind of editors are there? So we just started calling each other human editors. It stuck. So whoever wrote that Wired headline, you're in LinkedIn lore now.
Oh, that's very funny. I didn't know that was the origin of that, because that was in contrast to the algo, which it refers, of course, to the algorithm. So anyway, so that was quite a journey, writing on LinkedIn, and you helped me with that. But today, so now, of course, you left LinkedIn, and today you are now the founder, host, and producer of Borderline. You should maybe tell us about what you're doing now. Love to hear about what you're doing. And you seem to have invented a new term, which is, I believe, you call it media artisan.
Media artisan, yeah. We'll see if it catches on.
Exactly, yeah. Hashtag media. I did try it. I tried it as a hashtag on LinkedIn, and it didn't even pop up. So I think it's being. I think the folks at LinkedIn are deliberately blocking that hashtag.
I don't believe that. No, I think there's like 4 of us using it. But yeah, no. What I meant by that, and so Borderline first. Borderline is it's a podcast, it's a newsletter, it's a news site for by and with what I call defiant global citizens. So the idea is that I'm talking about living across borders, immigration, geopolitics, is in fact quite many topics, but always from a global perspective and from the perspective of people like you, people like me, who maybe live in a different country than they were born in, maybe have family that's spread all over the world, and just kind of have a perspective that goes kind of beyond the nation state. And I felt like that was important in this day and age, because there's a lot of borders closing and nationalistic movements rising, and I feel like there's just so much to gain as people, as countries, as economies, from just having a bit of a broader perspective. And it reflects my life, right? As you mentioned, you didn't even know what country I was in when we met. I moved around quite a bit. So I'm in London now after Australia, Cambodia, France, and the US. And then media artisan is kind of the term that I came up with because I was building this media brand and I didn't identify as a startup. I'm not trying to take over the world, scale, blitz scaling, VC fundraising, seed rounds, all that vocabulary, which I'm well familiar with, having worked in tech for many years. But I thought of what I do more as a small business. I'm purposefully staying at a scale where I can do a lot of the work myself. And I was thinking, of the cobbler who makes an entire shoe, right? And then with the Industrial Revolution, we started dividing up work to make it more productive. And we started, having someone who would cut the leather, and someone who would sew, and someone would make the heel, and someone who would design, and someone who would sell and market. And you get to a point, and then you put it all on conveyor belt, and that's even more dehumanizing. You get to a point that no one worker can look at a product and say, I made this, right? You just become incredibly remote and removed from the work that you're doing. And that's where you lose meaning. And that's where you lose connection and happiness ultimately. And so I was trying to reconnect to the work in a very direct way, rather than being part of a giant operation. Hence, media artisan.
That's very inspiring. So let's dive into that a little bit and pick it apart, disassemble it, and then put it back together again.
What like the shoe.
Exactly. I'm trying to riff on your metaphor here, which I thought was fantastic. Tell me about it. I mean, what's it been like? Because it's kind of, I don't know if have you ever become aware, let's get a little meta here, but you become aware of the fact that you actually enabled a lot of media artisans in a way. People, so I don't know if you've thought about it that way. So in your previous role as international editor at LinkedIn, you work with thousands of people around the world, and you influenced millions more through providing a tool, a very powerful tool that enabled creators, writers, podcasters, media artisans, as you describe it, to create and share their art, their content, as they say. I try to avoid that word content, their art.
I hate it too.
Exactly. It sounds more elegant. With a lot of people. And, I'm one tiny example of that. And then you left, and then you're building your crafting, pun intended, your own, sort of business, your own solopreneur business. Again, that's a sort of a buzzword, but I don't know. That's just how I see it. I see like you've gone from enabling, from being building the platform and enabling to actually you're in the trenches. You're doing it now yourself. And what's it like?
Mm-hmm. That is interesting. I hadn't looked at it that way, but I guess you didn't never really realize the narrative, right, of your own story, of your own career, until you kind of look back. So yeah, there's definitely some of that. I'm certainly using a lot of the things that I learned, and I laugh sometimes because I'm like really bad at following the advice that I was giving people like you years ago, because it's kind of what you're supposed to do, but then doing it is a whole different story. So it's definitely been interesting to be kind of on the other side, and definitely I feel very much like the work that I did before prepared me, as much as you can be prepared for this, because I'm using a lot of the techniques and a lot of things that I learned, from the other side. And I'm also, I also understand how platforms work. Having been part of a platform, I'm very sort of, my eyes are wide open to what the incentives are for platforms, with no animosity whatsoever, but I know that they're out for their own business, as they should be. And when you're a creator, you're your own business, and you have to be mindful of where the incentives might not be the same for other sides. So as a creator, I've been very adamant from the start about owning as much as I can. So I use other platforms. Obviously, LinkedIn is a big one, and I love it. But I own my email list. I own my brand. I'm very mindful of not relying on any single platform, because they can change an algorithm one morning, and it we've seen so many media brands do the whole like pivot to video or buy into whatever strategy some hot platform was selling one morning, and then 6 months down the line these things change so quickly. So that's definitely some experiences that I've been able to bring into Borderline.
Right. I think that's interesting the way you described that. What's also interesting is that you seem to start out on Substack, which is, as you know, a rapidly growing platform, for writers, a community of writers. It's attracting a large number of people, including myself, by the way. But then you shifted off of Substack and you created your own platform, your own website, with subscription membership functionality, and all the bells and whistles and more than what Substack was providing. Why did you do that, and what has been the outcome of that so far?
Yeah, love Substack. I met one of the founders, Hamish, back when I was still at LinkedIn in 2019, and I was just starting to use the platform. And I, to be honest, didn't do much with it the first year, but I had in mind, I know I'm going to be leaving LinkedIn soon, and I wanted to kind of put a stake in the ground. And I started out with Substack. And there's certainly more that I could have done with it, what I didn't. Ultimately, I chose to switch. So I have, my own site at borderlinepod.com, which is powered by Ghost, which is a platform that a lot of creators use. It's nonprofit, and what I liked about it was that it's more in the background. It enables a lot more functions. I can build something that a Substack site looks like a Substack site, right? Like a Ghost site looks like whatever you want it to be. So there's more option for just kind of really putting your own stamp on things and branding. One things that concern me is, there's been so much talk about Substack, is that it ended up that the Substack brand was more visible than the brand that I was trying to build. And so, going back to what I was saying about, being mindful of where platforms are going, I kind of sensed that a few months ago from Substack, and it's proving true so far that they're creating more and more features which are interesting, but which are definitely bundling all Substack together. Substack writers, again, said the word Substack like 400 times here, whereas Ghost is, aptly named, pretty much invisible, which is what I wanted to do. The other, more practical thing is that with Ghost, you can code, you can do whatever you want. So as long as you're a little bit technical, you actually have a lot more options. And because I don't have just a newsletter, I actually, have first a podcast and a newsletter and a news site and different articles that don't go through email. Otherwise, I would be drowning people's inboxes. I just had more options, so I'm having a blast. Like, I'm learning to code completely on my own, entirely self-taught. Again, it's back to the media artisan thing. It's like, if one day you don't want to write, there's a million other things you can do, including grabbing some power tools and building a recording studio. Like, I've done it all, and I like that variety.
That's great. I love to hear how all the sort of the behind the scenes of, what you're building. I think it's fascinating. I hope people are watching live, and if not, that's okay. We'll make this available as a recording later on my Substack, by the way, and on LinkedIn. It's fascinating. So you mentioned recording studio. Let's look at the podcast recording studio that Isabel Rugel has set up, because I think it's quite fascinating. I interviewed you on my budding podcast, Right with Impact. I believe the first year, I think it was like 2015.
Yeah.
That's when I started.
2015, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. You were kind enough, generous enough to actually be on the show, because as you know, I had nobody was listening to that darn thing anyway at the time. But you were definitely one of my first guests, one of my favorite guests, where we talked about writing on LinkedIn. Now, fast forward to now, I see you like, Ms. Podcaster. I mean, and I even saw an image of you a couple days ago. I caught you. You had like a soundproof, like a makeshift soundproof studio that you had created
Yeah.
through blankets.
You can see it.
And
if I move the camera, you can see it here.
Yeah.
I'm in my study. Yeah. It's a blanket fort, really. It's not pretty, but it works wonderfully. It's just a bunch of sound
breathe?
blankets.
But how do you breathe in there? Is there any oxygen? Do you have any, air?
Not much. My interviews are about an hour long, and that's really as long as you can stand in there.
Right.
I make sure to wear light clothing because it gets a little bit stuffy for sure.
Right, but that's the sign of a true sort of audiophile perfectionist. You want the sound quality perfect when you do that, right? When you go to that level. But that's, what have you learned about podcast production? And then also, like, you have to invite guests. It takes a lot of time to do that. You have to do the post production, editing, and I've heard your little ad on your podcast where you say, "Look, guys, this is tough stuff. Give me some money. I'm doing it all by myself."
Yeah, I wish they would.
I'm paraphrasing you in my crude American English. I'm paraphrasing you, but you're doing everything. You really are doing everything. So take us a little bit into your studio, which looks quite interesting and entertaining. It looks like you can, there's a lot of interesting books behind you. I see something, like an embroidered LinkedIn something or other behind you.
Oh yeah. So, there's a story behind that too. I stole that off the wall of the old LinkedIn office in London, which is now a hole in the ground. We were asked to move out, and they tore the building down to build something bigger and more expensive. So that's my LinkedIn memorabilia shelf with a lot of stuff from the early days. Yeah, and the studio, it's a bunch of blankets and a mic, really. And look, what I've learned about podcasting is don't do it, to be honest. As a solo project, I should say, when I left LinkedIn, so it was just before the pandemic, really. It was January 2020, and I just wanted a sabbatical and I wanted a rest, and I didn't think I would launch any kind of business. I thought, I'll just take a break and then eventually I'll get a job again. And then, pandemic and all that, forget traveling, forget the sabbatical. And I woke up with an idea one morning, and I've been listening to podcasts for, 15 years, like since they were first in, and then they disappeared and then they came back. And this entire time, I should have started earlier, really, because it's so hard to build an audience in podcasting now, but I've always wanted to have one. So I woke up with this idea one morning. The reality of podcasting is that it is quite possibly the worst media to do as a solo, from a business perspective, as a solo entrepreneur. It's an insane amount of work. If you want to do, you can just, you can just chat in your mic and say whatever. And there are plenty of podcasts like that. But if you're trying to do what I'm doing, which is a journalistic podcast with interviews, you've got to find the people, read their books. I interview a lot of authors, so it's a lot of reading. You got to, prepare, record, do all the producing and the emails of finding the time and all of that, and then edit, and then distribute and find an audience. Podcasting is notoriously hard to grow an audience for because it's not social friendly, and it is saturated. And it's really hard to monetize because it's pretty much just a free medium. It's an RSS feed with audio file stacked. So that's all the reasons why you should do it, except I'm having fun with it. So I keep doing it. From a business perspective, not necessarily the grandest idea. What's great though now is that there's so much that's available for people to do it solo that you couldn't have done 10 years ago, right? So there's hosting software and editing software. There's a lot you can do for free. I actually pay for mine because I want, a slightly higher quality, but you can start for free, see if you get traction, see if you like it before investing into, a fancy mic and a hosting platform and all of that. That's what I always recommend, before. I'm the kind of person who, starts a new activity, buys the entire kit, and then gives it up 2 weeks later. I have the sports kit for half a dozen sports in my closet. So don't do that. Don't be me. Think about it before you invest. But yeah, it's been a blast. I love the depth and the thoughtfulness that you can have in a medium like podcasting. We're in a world of a lot of outrage and quick takes and conflict. Those are the things that feed our social media, and you don't do that in audio because the second that you have voice, it's much more intimate, and you just have the time to be a bit more nuanced and in depth with people, and I love that, even if it's not a great business.
Right. Speaking of business, I mean, you do have a subscription business. Borderline is a subscription-based model.
Yeah.
And how's that going?
Not well. I mean, no, I have a few lovely supporting members who are amazing, who not only, contribute financially, but are also, my biggest cheerleaders, and are, I just created a video with a bunch of testimonials that they sent me to help in, recruit new members. They share the podcast, they comment, they send me ideas. I mean, it's like having your own little board, as a new company of advisor and allies, and so that's incredibly valuable. In terms of purely monetary reality, I would need a lot more, and that's kind of my focus now. Is okay, I've been on sabbatical. There was the pandemic, things were messy, I wasn't focused. Now it's like, I was just in a workshop yesterday I don't know if you know them, but the London Writers Salon, which is a wonderful community of writers. And we had a workshop because it's 100 days until the end of 2021, starting tomorrow. It's actually 101 days today. So tomorrow is 100 days to the end of 2021. And so, those 100 days, what am I going to focus them on? And it's very much focused on, heads down, creating a lot more content and just giving people more reasons to sign up and to join. So if you want to, borderlinepod.com/subscribe, definitely need the support and need the help. The reality of this kind of independent content creator is it is still something that people do, either, as a side thing while they have a full-time job, or when they're in the privileged position of having a runway financially, which is where I was because of my job in tech before. That has an end date, which is coming up pretty soon. But it is not it's not the glamorous world of YouTube stars and a handful of Substack writers making six-figure incomes, which are talked about ad nauseum. That's the very, very, tip. That's the snowflake at the top of the iceberg, compared to the reality, I think, of most creators.
Right. What about One Lane Bridge? Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, I mean, that's really more of a container for now. I just wanted to have a brand for, what other projects I will want to do. Because I think the thing when you're a creator, the risk is for a certain fatigue to set in, right? Like, how much can you write about the same topic? So, I have a pretty broad topics, which allows me to put in a lot of things. So I get curious about inequality. I get curious about climate change. I get curious about immigration, geopolitics. All of that can fit into Borderline. But One Lane Bridge is kind of the umbrella in which I will put, any other creative projects that I may have, for which, I have about half a dozen ideas that I'm not working on yet, because the day is 24 hours and procrastination is a powerful magnet.
Right. What about no pressure here, but have you thought about writing a book?
Oh, have I? Yes. For a while now, for several years, and I do have couple ideas that are related to Borderline. It was my other potential 100-day project, was just getting the book proposal together before the end of the year. I think that's going to be a 2022 project, because realistically, I need a financial support first before I can take the time to do that.
Right.
Choices, right? When you're a solo business, there are many ideas, but which ones to focus on is the hard choice.
Sure. Speaking of writing, you're a writer. You're a journalist by training. You went to, how do you guys pronounce it? Missouri.
Mizzou.
Yeah, Mizzou.
Yeah.
Is it University of Missouri School
Yep.
of Journalism,
School of
which
Journalism.
is definitely number one by far. And
I won't disagree.
and you've had a storied career, a very successful career as a journalist, from Cambodia to Paris to London. And you're a writer. You're an excellent writer. I mean, when you were at LinkedIn, you wrote a lot. I think I don't know if that was part of your role, baked into your job description, maybe, but it also seemed like you enjoyed it and you did very well, and you clicked with a lot of people, and you built an enormous following of 1.5 million people now. I remember one of my favorite articles that you wrote was, I'm not a brand. Don't call me I'm not a Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
I'm not a brand. I can't remember the title, but I used to, every year or two.
You're not a brand, you're a person, or something like that.
Exactly. I love that article, but it also sort of encapsulates, sort of captures sort of Isabel, the Isabel that I know. I mean, we haven't met yet in person. I don't think we have. But I feel like I know you through your writing. So that's the long-winded way of saying, tell me about, how do you write? that's the topic.
Not enough. Yeah.
So not enough. But when you do write, well, first of all, how does writing play into your media artisan strategy or approach? And then, tell us about, what goes through, what's your process?
Yeah. So actually, I do want to do a lot more writing. As I said, podcasting takes so much time, and I really enjoy the conversations. I need to figure out a way to, whittle down the time that I spend on editing it. I might actually start, releasing things that are maybe a little less polished, because when I edit, I take out all the ums and ahs, and it's very, very polished audio, and it's produced, and there's music and everything. But doing all that by yourself, it's kind of insane. Interestingly, actually, with my audio, I use software that is made for writers. So I use, I'm not a paid advertiser. I just really love this company. I use Descript, which does an AI transcript of the sound, of the audio of the conversation, so that you have a transcript, and then if you cut a word from the transcript, it cuts the corresponding audio. So I edit as a writer. I edit my audio as a writer. I mean, you can play around with the sound waves if you have to, which I do a bit. But I'm still at my core a writer, and I write the intros, and I think, kind of about the conducting my interviews as a writer as well. Writing itself, we'll definitely be doing a lot more of, because again, I want more content for the site. It tends to be, I do essays, opinion writing. It tends to be, things that strike me that I kind of think about, for a few days, and it'll hit me usually when I'm walking or when I'm in the shower, or in the middle of the night, always the wrong time. So I try to have a notebook on me to jot those things down when they happen. And then I sit down and put it together. It's pretty personal writing. I usually could put, quite a lot of myself and my own stories in it, which I'm always a bit ambivalent about, because you don't know who's reading, and there's the internet isn't always a pretty place. But at the same time, I feel like it's really the only way to write anything real and meaningful, is to put yourself in it, right? So yeah. I'm glad that story resonated with you. It's one of those that I'm not ashamed of 5 years later, which is good. Every once in a while you read back old writing, and you're like, oh, I wish this would disappear off the internet.
You can still delete it. No, that's a great article. Another one that I recall you wrote several years ago, I'll never forget it, is you wrote about the gap year that you took
Mm.
Is that how to you tell us a little bit about that gap year? So you went to the U.S. You went to high school in the
Yeah.
U.S. and I
Yeah.
guess you lived with a family there, and that just was such a major event for you in your life, a formative event. That's the word. I'm trying to get a little bit more precise with my English here. But I'd rather hear it from you. Yeah, just a little bit on that.
Yeah. I was an exchange student in high school. So that was when I was 17 years old. I left home. I was sponsored, supported by the Rotary, which is a wonderful organization, creating a lot of opportunities for young people. And I'm from France. English is not my native language, and I moved to New Jersey and spent a senior year of high school there, living with host families. And it's I often liken it to kind of a second birth year. Just I became fluent in English, but just my world completely expanded. And it's really is the start of who I am today. My interest in borderline, the fact that I'm multicultural, multilingual. It really all started there, and started my appetite for seeing more of the world, and for having this English language life and career that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And it was a very, very special year. A lot of wonderful people. I arrived in the United States 2 weeks before 9/11, and I had a view of the World Trade Center from my bedroom window. So it was just a very, very odd and strange time, personally and in the world. But I learned and I grew so much from it that I'm very, very, very grateful for it. And I'm so upset for young people today. The program had to be suspended. It's now the third year of the program being virtual only because of the pandemic. And those are life opportunities that unfortunately, are kind of age dependent, right? So it's not like you can wait and do it in 5 years. I mean, you can go abroad. It's just not going to be the same, right? Those formative years are so vital. So I'm really sad for young people who don't get that opportunity in this generation, and I hope that we all make it up to them in building a world that they can be happy and thrive again.
No, I know. My son took 3 semesters of his college education at home, remotely, across time zones. And in Taipei, his college is in Boston,
Oh,
but he
wow.
took his classes overnight. So he was, literally, he would stay up all night taking his classes and then sleep during the day. And he did very well, by the way. But he's back in Boston now, which is great.
Mm.
And hopefully we can return to these things in a normal situation. Let's say we get COVID under control. Would you recommend young people take a gap year? Meaning,
Oh, yes.
what does that mean? That means they don't sort of rush headlong into college and university and get on the hamster wheel or the staircase, the ladder, trying to get a job, but rather take chill out for a year or two. Not necessarily chill out, but you know what I mean. Take a year off that hamster
Yeah.
wheel. I don't know if that's the right
Yeah,
metaphor.
absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, I recommend it, and I wish it were um, part, because it's still too often, privileged children who are able to do that. I wish it was actually part of the public education system that you have to have a year abroad. I actually recommend it younger. So I know you can take a year abroad in university, but it ends up being just party time for a lot of kids, and and taking, because they can't quite give up the academic, they take classes in their own language, whatever. It's not the same, but being in high school just dropped in an American high school, taking classes in English when I wasn't fluent or bilingual, living in a family where you have to adapt to the way that people live in that particular country. All those things make you grow so much as a person, as an individual. And in a way, I mean, the language, that's nice, but it's really a small byproduct. It's just a maturity that you gain, the self-knowledge, the knowledge of the world. I was doing an interview recently on a podcast with someone who said, you don't really know who you are until you've left home. And I really believe that that's true. And I think, the sooner you do it, the more you gain. I mean, in perspective. I mean, so you can't do it when you're 10, but do it 15, 16, 17. That's incredibly, incredibly valuable. And I think the skills that you get, those are the people we need more of in the world. People who understand where other people come from, who are able to put themselves in other people's shoes, who are able to understand other cultures, and to, have that empathy, that broad-mindedness, and are able to build bridges between people who don't understand one another. Those are skills that I've used in my entire life, whether this is building, bridges between different countries, also between different industries. Being a journalist inside a tech company, you kind of have to speak two different languages and connect people who don't think the same way about problems. So I think in life and work, it's some of the most valuable skills you can have. And all the kids I've seen go through this, and I've seen many, because I've kept volunteering, and my family has hosted exchange students forever. It's all the kids I see go through this are just incredibly bright, kind, and promising young individuals. And I think the world needs more of them.
Right. Is that sounds like a, one angle or one tenet of your borderline philosophy?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about, I try to, set down the values that I believe in and that guide Borderline, and their truth. I should remember them.
Independence.
Truth, compassion, and wonder. Independence is one of them. I could do a whole list, but the idea of, truth always being, mindful of accuracy and of truth. It's not just the facts, but in a nuance of things. Compassion, having this openness to others, even those that you don't necessarily agree with. And wonder, I just, we need to re-enchant the world a little bit. There's a lot of hard things out there, and a lot of reasons to be angry and to despair. But someone who's, has always seen the glass half full. I think it's just, even if it's inaccurate, it's a better way of living. And I really believe in just finding the joy and finding the wonder in life experiences as being really important.
Right. I'd like to open the floor to questions. I would really love to see at least one or two questions before we end this session. But while we're waiting for somebody to ask a question, I don't know if you can see any questions coming in. I'm trying to see, I'm seeing comments coming in where I am.
I've seen a few LOs, but no questions.
Okay, no questions. So just as a call for questions, we happen to get Isabel's time here. Isabel is Isabel. I don't know if you know Isabel, but you got to get to know Isabel. She is Isabel Rugel, and no, she's very humble, clearly very humble. But she actually, along with a fantastic team at LinkedIn, she really helped build LinkedIn's publishing platform to what it is today. And I personally am grateful to you for what you did and how you supported me over the years. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm grateful to you. You were one of the early believers in what we were doing. And I know not only have you created a lot, you've also brought a lot of other people to create, and you've recruited others and helped them as well. So, yeah. I think that's wonderful, and always with a pretty positive mindset. Oh, I see a question. From Dana. Yeah. Any advice for communicating technical topics to a non-technical audience? Yes. There are kind of two ways of doing this. One is to simplify as much as possible. Like bullet points. Keep it light. The other, and as a writer, it's my favorite, is story. Oh, thank you, Dana. Yeah, story is, finding metaphors, finding ways to, so for instance, the media art, it's not exactly a technical topic, but the media artisan story, like what the hell does that mean? Well, if I tell you the story of the cobbler, and how the cobbler was replaced with this, conveyor belt of industrial shoemaking that completely lost all meaning, you kind of understand where I'm coming at with the media artisan, right? So it's finding those ways that metaphors that your audience will understand, that will make them connect with your story. The other thing is you have the opportunity, as much as possible, to not make it a one-way communication, but make it two-way. Literally ask people, what do you need from me? How will you understand this? What do you not understand? What do you need me to do to better understand this? or do you need visuals? Do you need just us to talk face to face rather than have a long email? It's always thinking about. I mean, if you're just if you're writing and publishing, it's a bit more one way. But if you have an opportunity to hear back from the audience, the best way to, instead of wondering what people don't understand, is just ask them, right?
That's great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great advice. I'll just give you my short take on it. This is a great question, by the way, Dana. Thank you for asking. Any advice for communicating technical topics to a non-technical audience? Clearly there are certain domains that require the use of technical terminology, acronyms, jargon. However, I would say I'm in a business where there's a lot of jargon, a lot of terminology that is used and maybe overused. And so what I recommend is I edit other people's writing. I try to convert jargon into plain English and try to ask, what do you mean by that? What are you trying to say here? And can you just say it literally in plain English? And challenge the writer. If you're not the writer, let's say I'm an editor of somebody else's writing. Now, if I'm writing myself, of course, I'm always thinking of that myself. I'm trying to write literally in plain English, avoiding jargon. If I need to use an acronym, I'll spell it out at first. Just make sure people know what I'm referring to, because some people like to drop acronyms without explaining what it stands for. But in essence, it's really about clarity, just being as clear and just using as clear of language as possible, English as possible, rather than leaning on jargon and terminology, which again, sometimes you absolutely have to use certain terms. You just can't avoid it. But I think there's a way to translate it for a broader audience.
Mm-hmm. By the way, this was a question that came up a lot when I was working at LinkedIn, because as I mentioned before, we were a team of journalists working with software engineers, and those are two completely different worlds. And my colleague Marissa Wong wrote a wonderful article. It's been years and years, but I will find it again because I keep referring to it, about kind of how to talk to an engineer when you're not one. And kind of distilling all of those things that she learned, that we learned on the team. That was really, really helpful. So it's kind of the opposite, being non-technical, talking to technical people. But I think it works both ways. Thank you, Dana, for the question.
Yeah, that was a great question. Any other questions, please? We still have a few minutes left. That was an excellent question. That's something that I think about and I write about once in a while.
Mm.
I'm a jargon killer. I hate jargon.
Jargon is the worst, and I mean it's a way to exclude your readers, because it's a way to say, look, I know what this means, and I'm only writing for people who know what this means, and everyone else can just go do something else. So it's a way to exclude. It's a way to restrict how many people you're talking to. It might make sense if you're trying to have a little insider chat with just people in your team or your company or whatever. But if you're trying to write to a broader audience, you don't want to make your audience feel stupid. Nobody likes that feeling.
That's right. Isabel, what language do you think in? Because I know you're a native, obviously you're a native French speaker. My assumption is this. My assumption is that you go around 98% of the time you're thinking in French, but you've been living in London for a while. You lived in the US for many years. You've worked for essentially a US company, right, for many years. So there's a lot of, and then you speak flawless English, right? And you write flawlessly in English. How do you do it? How do you handle these two languages?
I couldn't tell you, because I just think, you don't pay attention to the language that you're thinking in, right? I do talk to myself a little bit sometimes. I live alone. You got to make some noise. And it's both. And if you look at my planner, if you look at my notes, it's like, the sentence, one is in English, the next sentence is in French. It really is pretty interchangeable. Obviously things that are more, talking to my family, or obviously is going to be in French. So often my personal to-do list is in French, but my professional to-do list is in English because my work is in English. So yeah, I just kind of mix it up. It also nowadays, it's interesting because, I've been bilingual for 20 years now. 20 years ago, when I was living in the States, I had a lot less contact, right? I think that year that I spent abroad, I, called my family, I don't know, 3 times. I remember, my mom called me on 9/11, obviously. And, we had emails, but, we didn't have Skype. International calls were extremely expensive. So, there was not a lot of contact. And even a few years later, when I was at university, it was kind of very early years of Facebook. So my life was mostly in English. Nowadays, I consume, because of podcasting and all that, I consume media in both languages every single day. And so I'm able to switch back and forth much, much more easily versus, 20 years ago, I actually lost my French. When I came home, my French was a bit ridiculous because I didn't use it for a year. Pretty much, there was no one that spoke French around me. So it's actually interesting now because, being an immigrant used to be a big transition. You were really cut off in many ways from home. Not my generation, but just go back a couple generations and, people would get on a boat and never come back, never see their relatives again. It's very different now. And so you don't get the same level of immersion. The tie to home is much easier to have than it used to be.
All right. Do you speak any other languages besides French and English?
German. I took German in school, but I'm not fluent. I can I can read it and I can manage it. French schools are very book based, so I can read a whole, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung cover to cover, but having a conversation in a restaurant would be a challenge.
Sure. No, I think a lot of language programs like that. This is a call for questions. Please, we're open. Isabel, answer anything and everything. There's no restriction here. But as we move along towards the end of the hour, what advice would you give? Okay, here's a challenge that I find a lot of people are facing, including myself, by the way. It's getting quite there. There are a lot of voices out there, which is wonderful. I mean, I've been an advocate. I've been trying to encourage other people to write and to get their voice out there. And yet it is getting quite crowded, and there's a lot of noise in the system. And then there's the algorithm, which is like this big matrix. I envision this big matrix sort of controlling the whole world, is out the algo, as you call it. So how do you break through that? And then if you can't really break through that, does it matter? Meaning, do you just sort of try to build one by one, your audience, and try to do something that's meaningful and relevant to them, and hope they come back? And how do you see that? Because it's not like it was, say, 7 years ago when you and I were just starting out, working together on writing on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and even for people who built an audience back then, it's still really hard to get attention now. And just because I have 1.5 million followers on LinkedIn doesn't mean my messages always get through the way I want to. And I like the second half of this question, which is, does it matter? And in a way, it doesn't. I mean, if you're really just thinking about, there's a business, and we'll get to that. But if you're just thinking about writing, write what is meaningful to you. Don't, I think the biggest mistake I see people make, and we had this conversation often, when you were helping other people as well with their content, is people kind of write by committee and think, okay, here's a niche, here's, what I need to do, blah, blah, blah. And it just becomes like strategic, but it's not what's, core to you. It's not what speaks to you. And people are smart. People can tell. So the things that I write are just very real to my experience and the things that I care about and the things that I value. Is it for everyone? No, certainly not. It's hard to monetize because it's not business content, which is what, people can easily put on their expense report and buy a subscription for. So there are many reasons why business-wise it's really hard, but it is the thing that speaks to me. Now, yes, that doesn't mean, so I like the idea of just writing for just the process and for expressing yourself, writing, creating, whatever it is that you do, and removing yourself from the outcome a little bit, which is a bit more out of your hands. That said, obviously, if you're doing a business, you do want it to get places, and even if you're not, you want to find an audience. You want you want your words to be heard, and there it's constant experimentation. algorithms change, things, change. It's finding, an audience of people who care. I'd happily cut my LinkedIn followers, 10x and have 150,000, not 1.5 million, if all of them were deeply invested in my topic and responded to all that I do and were, had a higher conversion rate into becoming paying subscribers. So, just chasing follower counts is completely pointless. So just finding that audience who cares, and in the beginning, honestly, my email list is much, much smaller than my LinkedIn list, and it's hunting them down one by one. It's reaching out to somebody who's following you and interacting with you a lot on Twitter and being like, hey, by the way, I have this thing that I don't think you've subscribed to, it's a lot of manual work, especially in the beginning. And then making sure that you're delivering things that keep people interesting and turns them into advocates for your work, because that's kind of how it multiplies, right? Is if the people who read your stuff are moved to share it with their friends, that's the best way to get a bigger audience. But it's hard, man, and I struggle with it all the time. So that's that's the reality.
Right. Isabel, just a little reminder for anyone who's just decided to drop by and, check us out. Isabel Rugel is the founder, host, and producer of Borderline, which is a newsletter, website, community, and an amazing podcast where she interviews fantastic writers and thinkers and doers of all sorts. And highly recommend you subscribe to her podcast and also to her newsletter, and then definitely help her out and make a contribution, because she deserves it.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's at borderlinepod.com is the website, and you'll find everything there.
Yeah, it's very nicely designed, very professional, but you've got a gazillion years of experience, deep experience as a professional journalist in Isabel, and someone who cares a lot about what's happening in the world and has a very interesting, original, fresh point of view. So you'll see what I mean. Just check her out.
Well, thank you so much for that. I'm gonna cut that little bit of audio of this recording and use it for my for my advertising.
That's great, and I'll give you my PayPal link so you can give me a commission.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah, no, it's you seem to figure out all the technologies. I'm quite impressed, and I don't know if you said it on the air in this LinkedIn Live or if you said it before we recorded. You were saying something like you were learning how to code. I mean, Isabel, journalist, writer, coder, what the heck? So I'm very impressed. You figured out, you've got the theme, this ghost theme, and ghost is very new to me. I'm a WordPress, I'm an old fashioned WordPress guy, but this ghost is quite compelling. And then Krabby, which is like a membership, theme for ghost.
Yeah. It's just a theme. Yeah. The template theme for, Yeah, I mean, I've always loved computers and, managed. It's really like learning a foreign language. I couldn't possibly write code from scratch, but I can look at an element on the back end, see what it does on the front end, tweak it, see if it breaks the site. I broke the site about an hour before this. I was like, shoot, I'm about to give people the URL and it's not working. So I fixed it. But yeah, it's the joy of kind of being indie and a small business is you do everything on your own and you get to learn new skills. And if that's the wonderful thing about the internet today. If there's something you don't know how to do, somebody has the answer. Some of the things that I implement, that I coded on the site, I literally grab code from other sites or was on forums and being like, hey, how do you do this? I'd like to implement it. It's fun. It can be a terrible distraction though from the core, which is writing and content. So I've spent a lot of time in the past couple of months on creating the platform, building the websites and the funnel to get people to subscribe and all of that. The thing that I actually need to be doing now, and I'm going to be really focusing on, is writing to give people the things that make it worth their time to be subscribing. So, check it out at borderlinepod.com. There's going to be a lot more coming in the next 100 days. That's my public commitment. That's the thing when you're working solo as well, is you need to figure out what kind of accountability works for you. For me, it is the shame of not doing the things that I publicly said I will do. That's my engine. So here I am promising all your listeners and you, Glenn, that there will be more coming.
That's great. No, expectations are running high, but I know you can deliver. And with, on that note, actually, I would say my public commitment, I've said this a couple of times on my Write with Impact Academy, which is on Substack, by the way. I've announced that I am writing a book, and
Wonderful.
yep. And I'm saying that because I know I'm going to put myself on the hook publicly. And I'm gonna eat myself up, just privately trying to figure out how to get it done now that I've announced it. But that's one of the reasons. But the way you described it is exactly right. It's really about public accountability when you don't really have, sort of real hardcore, accountability. You're sort of trying to encourage yourself to do it. It's not easy to motivate yourself. Where do you find maybe one more question I have of you? And by the way, welcome the audience to ask one more question. Go for it. I welcome your questions. But Isabel, where do you find your motivation? I've been thinking about this quite a bit. I've been thinking, and maybe I'll write a little article at some point about, how I've found my motivation. I realize I've been quite focused over a long period of time. And I don't know how or why. I'm trying to figure that out. Where did I find my intense, focus? And I'm not always focused. And, I waste a lot of time. I'm a terrible procrastinator. But where do you, but net, I've been quite, in general, quite focused and motivated. How do you do that?
I don't know. I don't know that I am. I want to know your tricks. It's something that I've actually been really thinking about a lot and struggling with because, yes, I've built Borderline and I've done, I think, good things with it. I'm not happy with, some of it, like the podcast is good. The newsletter, I think, needs a lot more work and there's not enough monetization. So there's plenty that I haven't done. And I've struggled with, putting in a full workday partly because originally I was on sabbatical and I was quite burned out. And feel like it took me a lot longer than I expected to get out of that mindset. So it's hard, especially when you're solo. So a lot of it is just, self-work in a very hippie-ish sounding way, but it's just knowing yourself and understanding what motivates you. So what helps is I'm doing something that I love. That said, I don't necessarily love every single part of it all the time, and I'm very good, as I was saying, at getting myself distracted with fun little projects that don't necessarily align with the priorities at the moment, which is growing this as a business. So I have found actually that I was a bit lacking motivation because I was too comfortable. And now that I'm running out of financial runway, I'm finding my motivation again. So, sometimes having a little bit of a fire under you certainly helps. And again, I know that external accountability works for me. So, I had a break in between podcast seasons where I was kind of planning the next season. I wasn't super productive because I didn't have deadlines. And so then I just said, you know what? I'm launching September 9th. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I better have an episode in the pipeline September 9th. And now that I have people that pay for the platform, obviously, I better deliver because I don't want to steal people's money. So, for me, external accountability helps a lot. There's a wonderful group called London Writers Salon that I've just joined as a paying member, actually, but there's plenty that's available for free. They do a writer's hour. They've done that the entire pandemic, which has been wonderful. So it's like 300-400 writers on Zoom at 8 a.m, all writing together in silence, and finding people who can be your motivation. I'm also I have kind of a few other media artisans who share the same struggles, and we talk a lot on Twitter mostly. So it's finding people who can motivate you when you're not is really helpful because it can get very lonely being a solo entrepreneur.
Now that's so finding a community, a writing community.
Yeah, a writing community, and finding whatever accountability works for you. For some people it's rewards, right? Okay, like I'm allowed I'm allowed chocolate after I've written 1,000 words or whatever. For some people, it's external accountability. So if I tell people that I'm writing a book, then I have to because I told them I would. So we all our brains all work in different ways. For me, external accountability is certainly a big one. And having that external support, and also having enough going on. Ironically, I find that when you have just a free open day in front of you, you don't do much with it. Having a schedule, having a few commitments here and there during the week rather than having a fully open week, for me works better. But again, it's about knowing yourself, and just benefit of a few years of experience, you figure out how you work.
No, that's great advice. We're going to wrap it up pretty soon here, but just very quickly. So Isabel Ruegel is the founder, host, and producer of Borderline, which is an amazing newsletter and podcast and website and community. You should definitely sign up and follow her. If you don't know Isabel already, that's okay. I'll forgive you. But Isabel is sort of a rock star, and she's also invented a term which I love, and I'm probably going to plagiarize heavily from now on, which is media artisan. So she
You're welcome to
it. Yeah, thank you. I'll try to give you credit if I can remember. And media artisan is a fantastic concept that we talked about earlier in this LinkedIn live session. This LinkedIn live session will be available on my LinkedIn, and I'll also publish it on my Substack. We were talking about Substack earlier. It's writewithimpact.substack.com. So that's my site. That's my Substack newsletter. I hope you sign up. I also have a podcast called Write with Impact. But Isabel go to borderlinepod.com, and you can sign up for Isabel's amazing newsletter and also podcast. And it's very, very well done. There's one friend who said hello that I was showing earlier. I'm just going to say hello. A quick shout out to Andrea Koppel from Maryland. Andrea, I was on her podcast. She was on my podcast recently. Andrea is a former journalist like yourself. She worked for CNN for a number of years, and has become a good friend on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, I think that's, ending on a little bit of a positive high note. Just a reminder, Isabel was the international editor among many other roles, but that was one of her major roles for LinkedIn. And Isabel is responsible for basically us all being together here. Seriously. I mean, Isabel brought me on to LinkedIn as a writer. And then I dragged in a bunch of other people in my firm and friends and, and other people. And I had quite a bit of success, largely due to the support of editors like Isabel. And I'll also shout out to Chip Cutter. I can't help but mention Chip.
Hi, Chip.
Hi, Chip, who's now at the Wall Street Journal doing incredibly well. He's writing those amazing pieces about, anyway, follow Chip
also
Cutter on
a member
LinkedIn.
Of Borderline, a wonderful supporter.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
So between Chip and Isabel, and I can go down the whole roster of editors at LinkedIn, all wonderful people, brought people like us, with Andrea Koppel and so many others. I made so many friends that I still haven't met in person yet, but it doesn't matter. I feel, closer, and I feel like I know you and others like Andrea and so many others better than a lot of people who are sort of physically near me, if you know what I mean. So anyway, that's just a little bit of a wrap up. Is there anything else, any parting advice besides check out your website and your newsletter and podcast?
Yeah, no, I'm going to echo this. I'm eternally grateful to the LinkedIn community, the wonderful years I had there, that have in fact enabled what I'm doing now. And I think about easily, a good chunk of the members of Borderline are, former colleagues or writers or people who found me. Pretty much nearly all of them, people who found me on LinkedIn, have been following me there for many years when I was writing the daily business newsletter that LinkedIn put out. So it's just wonderful to have people follow my career and continue to be interested and interact. It's been really it's been really, really good. And again, it can be a lonely life as a solo entrepreneur, so that kind of community is incredibly valuable. So shout out to all of them, and thank you. And to you, Glenn.
Great. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining this LinkedIn Live session. I'm going to hit the end stream button in a moment here. And if you have any suggestions or feedback, send me a private message. Don't make it too public. I'm just kidding. Just send me a message, connect with me, follow me, and reach out to me. I would love to hear some feedback from any of you who have watched this or listened to this. And so thanks. Have a wonderful day. I think it's 9 p.m. here in Taipei, but I believe it's what time is it over there? 2 p.m. 2:14.
2 p.m. 2 p.m.
Okay. Yeah. In London. You're in London, is that right?
London, absolutely, yes.
Very nice city. Very envious. Okay, thanks everyone.
All right. Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.